The biker bar was loud laughing, shouting, drowning in smoke, until a black teenage girl walked in alone. Her jacket hung loose on her shoulders, worn and clearly not meant for her. That's when the laughter turned sharp. One biker leaned back and shouted, "You lost, kid?" The room exploded again. No one stepped in. No one questioned why she was there. She stood still, silent, then slowly turned her back to them. That's when they saw the patch. The noise died instantly. Because that jacket wasn't a joke, and neither was the truth stitched into it. So why did it scare them into silence? Comment below and tell us what you would have done in that room. And subscribe, because stories like this don't get told unless people stay and listen. Naomi had learned how to move through the world quietly. School ended. She walked home the same streets, counted her steps, kept her eyes forward. In a town where people noticed her skin before her age, caution felt safer than confidence. At home, everything revolved around her mother's failing health. Linda Brooks tried to hide how bad it was, but Naomi saw the unpaid bills, the mistreatments, the way worry never left her face. The jacket hanging in Naomi's closet was the one thing she never touched. It smelled like oil and old leather, heavy with memory. It had belonged to her father, Marcus Brooks, a man people used to respect before his name faded into silence. Years ago, he had ridden with a biker group that now acted like the past didn't exist. Promises were made after his death. None were kept. That night, desperation outweighed fear. Naomi put on the jacket and walked into the only place left that still carried his memory, a roadside biker bar known for loud laughter and sharper judgment. Inside, men filled the room. White faces turned toward her the moment she stepped in. Rick Holloway was the first to laugh, loud and careless, setting the tone for everyone else. Others followed, some amused, some uncomfortable. One older biker, George Whitman, recognized the jacket immediately but stayed silent, trapped between guilt and pride. Across the room, Ethan Brooks watched closely, already sensing that something wasn't right. Naomi stood there, heart pounding, knowing she didn't belong, but also knowing she couldn't turn back. She wasn't there to beg. She was there because silence had already taken enough from her family, and the room was about to be forced to remember what it chose to forget. The room didn't calm down after the laughter it sharpened. The air inside the bar felt heavier, like everyone sensed something was wrong but didn't want to be the first to admit it. Naomi Brooks stayed where she was, shoulders tight beneath the oversized jacket, eyes steady even as the noise pressed in from all sides. She wasn't shaking. Not outwardly. Years of being watched, judged, and underestimated had taught her how to stand still while everything inside burned. Rick Holloway circled closer, feeding off the attention. His laughter wasn't just mockery, it was permission. Permission for others to stare longer, whisper louder, smirk without consequence. The jacket drew eyes like a magnet, its worn leather clashing with the polished confidence of the men who filled the room. Naomi felt every second stretch, each laugh landing like proof that she didn't belong. "Yo, you really think you can just walk in here wearing that?" Rick shouted. The sound ripped through the bar, louder than the music, louder than the engines outside. A few bikers laughed harder. Others shifted in their seats, uneasy but silent. Silence was safer. Silence always protected the ones already comfortable. Naomi's thoughts flickered to home, to the dim kitchen light, to her mother coughing behind a closed door. Linda Brooks had tried to smile earlier that evening, pretending the pain wasn't getting worse, pretending hope still had time. Naomi hadn't told her where she was going. Some truths were easier to carry alone. Rick leaned in closer, eyes scanning the jacket like it was a costume meant for ridicule. "That thing looks stolen. You trying to play somebody you're not?" A ripple of reaction moved through the room. That word, stolen, hung in the air longer than it should have. Naomi felt it settle deep, familiar and ugly. She had heard it before, at stores, on sidewalks, in voices that decided who deserved trust and who didn't. Near the back, George Whitman stiffened. His gaze locked onto the stitching on Naomi's jacket, recognition flashing across his face before he looked away. His jaw tightened. He knew exactly what he was seeing and exactly what it meant. But knowing didn't move him. Guilt rarely did. Ethan Brooks watched from the side, arms crossed, scanning the room instead of the girl. He noticed who laughed and who didn't, who looked away, who leaned in. He felt the tension building, the kind that came before something irreversible. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was exposure. Rick slapped the bar with his palm, demanding attention again. Say something. Or, is that jacket doing all the talking for you? Naomi's chest tightened, but she didn't respond. Silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. She knew every word she didn't say was making the room more uncomfortable. Letting them sit with it was the point. The jacket carried weight none of them wanted to face. It carried Marcus Brooks, a man whose name once meant loyalty, sacrifice, and respect. A man who had given everything and received nothing back for his family. Naomi could feel him there, not as comfort, but as pressure, reminding her why she couldn't leave. Rick mistook her silence for surrender. He turned to the room, spreading his arms. Look at her! Thinks a patch makes her important. That did it. The laughter came back, louder, sharper, but thinner now. Forced, nervous. The room was splitting, those enjoying the cruelty and those realizing they were complicit. George finally shifted in his chair, breath heavy. His eyes flicked between Naomi and the door, as if escape were still an option. It wasn't. The past had a way of trapping people when they refused to face it. Rick stepped back, confidence swelling again. You don't belong here. Take it off and walk out. The words landed like a challenge, not just to Naomi, but to the truth stitched into her jacket. The bar fell quiet, not because the tension was gone, but because everyone felt it peak. No one knew what would happen next. Naomi lifted her chin slightly. The room leaned forward without realizing it. Whatever was coming would force a choice. And choices, once made in public, can't be taken back. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Naomi didn't move, but something had shifted. The laughter was gone. In its place sat a thick, uncomfortable silence that exposed everyone standing in it. The jacket no longer looked oversized. It looked heavy. History. Heavy. Rick Holloway sensed the change before he understood it. His confidence wavered, eyes darting around the bar, searching for the approval that had fueled him minutes earlier. It wasn't there anymore. The crowd wasn't with him. Not fully. And that terrified him. Naomi finally turned, slowly, deliberately, giving the room what it had been avoiding. The patch on her back caught the dim light, its edges worn, its stitching unmistakable. A few bikers straightened. Others froze. Some looked down at the floor like it had suddenly become interesting. George Whitman stood up. The scrape of his chair against the floor cut through the silence like a warning. He stared at the jacket, eyes wet, jaw clenched, the weight of years crashing into him all at once. He remembered the rides, the promises, the funeral where everyone swore they'd take care of the family left behind. Rick scoffed, trying to regain control. Don't tell me that patch means something now. The words landed wrong, too loud, too desperate. George didn't look at him. He looked at Naomi, at the girl who had walked into a room full of men and forced them to confront who they'd become. His voice shook when he finally spoke. That jacket belonged to a man who saved this club, when no one else would. A murmur spread through the bar, low and unsettled. Heads turned, faces changed. Rick's smile vanished. Ethan Brooks stepped forward, pulling something from his jacket pocket. Papers! Old photos! Proof no one had asked for, but everyone recognized. He placed them on the bar, one by one, letting the evidence speak before he did. I was there the night her father died, and none of you showed up after. The accusation didn't need volume. It burned anyway. Naomi felt the moment crest, the truth finally standing where silence used to hide. Marcus Brooks wasn't just a name stitched into leather. He was real. He was remembered. And the way this room had treated his daughter was now impossible to excuse. Rick backed away a step, then another, shaking his head as if denial could still save him. This isn't how it happened! You're twisting it! No one answered him. Linda Brooks wasn't in the room, but her presence hung there all the same, ill, waiting, forgotten by the same people who once promised they'd never let her struggle alone. Naomi felt anger rise, sharp and focused, not loud, controlled. She spoke once, her voice steady, carrying farther than shouting ever could. "Y'all all promised he wouldn't be forgotten." The words landed like a verdict. Rick looked around, searching for laughter, for backup, for anything that resembled power. There was none left. Just faces reflecting guilt, shame, and the realization that the truth had finally outpaced them. The bar didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It didn't explode into chaos. It sat in silence, forced to reckon with what it had allowed. And Naomi knew one thing with painful clarity. This moment couldn't be undone, no matter what came next. Naomi didn't stay long after that. She didn't wait for apologies, explanations, or uncomfortable attempts to rewrite what had just happened. She turned and walked out of the bar with the same quiet control she had walked in with. Outside, the night air felt colder, heavier, but clearer. What she carried now wasn't fear. It was truth, finally seen. The next morning, life didn't magically improve. Linda Brooks was still sick. Bills were still unpaid. The damage done over years didn't disappear in one night. But something had shifted. Help came, not out of kindness, but out of obligation finally remembered. The silence that had protected indifference was broken. Inside the biker group, nothing went back to normal. Rick Holloway lost more than his confidence. He lost the respect he built on cruelty and noise. People stopped laughing with him. They started remembering who he showed himself to be. George Whitman didn't pretend anymore. He carried the weight openly now, knowing guilt unspoken only rots deeper. Ethan Brooks made sure the truth didn't stay trapped in that room. What happened spread quietly, steadily, not as gossip, but as a reminder. Marcus Brooks was spoken of again, not as a patch or a memory, but as a man whose sacrifice was ignored until it embarrassed those who benefited from it. Naomi returned home, changed, not healed, not comforted, changed. She understood something most people never have to learn so young, that dignity isn't given when you're quiet, and justice doesn't arrive on its own. Sometimes it has to be forced into the light. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a real one. Because racism doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like laughter. Sometimes it looks like silence. And sometimes it survives simply because people decide it's easier not to get involved. The question isn't what Naomi endured. The question is, how many times have we watched something like this happen and done nothing? If this story made you uncomfortable, it should have. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and tell us your thoughts below. Subscribe to Black Community Struggles, because silence is exactly what these stories are fighting against.